You're listening to Big World Network.
Accidental Passion, Episode 7, Terror, read by Meagan Hedin. Warning: although there is no material subject matter within that couldn't be found in any general bookstore with no age constraint, this series is rated 18 and contains adult situations and content. It is intended for mature audiences only and should not be read if you are uncomfortable with graphic sexual intimacy. Kevin was feeling the effects of the alcohol as he rode up the elevator with his best friend and the luscious escort. He had resigned to seeing where the evening would lead, feeling somewhat out of control, but enjoying the sensation. It was almost as if he and Scott were playing a silent game of chicken, seeing who would call the bluff first and put a stop to it, but neither had yet. And now he found himself in an elevator heading up to the hotel room with both of them. Watching as the floor numbers lit up one by one, they all silently stared at the display. Kevin could smell a whiff of cheap perfume emanating from the girl. Finally, as they reached his floor, the elevator started coming to a stop, causing the odd sensation of slowing movement, and then there was a distant ding as the doors opened. They stepped out, and Kevin scanned the room guide directly ahead on the wall, and turned left towards the room number he was looking for. As they approached the door, the other two remained uncomfortably silent as he fumbled into his pocket for the key card. Finally extracting it, he slid it in the slot 3 times before finally getting the green light and hearing the familiar sound of the electronic lock releasing. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to relax. As they entered the dark room with just the entry hall light on, Kevin made his way into the main part of the room, found an end table lamp, and turned it on. As he did so, Scott plopped down in a chair near the window, and the call girl, Sandy, opened the honor bar and removed a small bottle of bourbon, unscrewing the top and taking a long pull from it before handing the bottle to Scott. Kevin briefly considered making a comment about the cost of drinking from the room bar, but he knew it would seem trite, especially considering why they were there, and that he was about to pay a prostitute $500. Kevin went into the bathroom and closed the door behind him, taking a deep breath. After relieving himself, he flushed and stood in front of the mirror while washing his hands. "This is crazy," he thought, running his fingers through his hair before drying them off. It may have been crazy, but the thought of what might happen and, as it seemed probably would happen, excited him, leaving him semi-erect ever since the woman had joined them down in the bar. He didn't want to admit it, but the thought of having Scott there excited him even more. After their other encounter, and thinking about it at length, Kevin was convinced that he wasn't gay or even bi, but instead it was the taboo of it all that excited him. His heterosexuality had always been something he emphasized, working hard to make it clear to others that he was all man. Not wanting to take any more time in the bathroom, he turned the sink on again and splashed a little water on his face, then dried it off with one of the white towels neatly rolled on the counter by the miniature bottles of shampoo and soaps. He knew that, when he walked out, there would be an extremely awkward period of time when everyone would be waiting, not wanting to be the first to make a move. But that wasn't the case. When he returned to the main room, Sandy was standing in front of Scott, who had his hand up under her short dress between her legs, with a pink thong pulled down to just above her knees. She moved her knees closer together, allowing it to drop down to her ankles. After stepping out of it 1 foot at a time, she pulled her short dress up and over her head, rendering her completely naked. "Come here, baby," she said, looking at Kevin and motioning with a becoming gesture of her index finger. Kevin took the several steps towards her as Scott sat in a nearby chair, smiling, his hand moving down between his still-closed legs. Kevin, fully hard now, stood in front of Sandy with Scott seated in the chair beside them. Unable to help himself, Kevin reached up with both hands and cupped her breasts. "That's it," she purred, as she reached down and undid Kevin's belt, sliding his zipper down and exposing his stiff member underneath his boxers. She reached down to his sides and, in one swift motion, pulled his polo shirt over his head. Releasing her hands from her chest long enough for her to remove his shirt, Kevin quickly returned them, very aware that his friend was sitting inches away from where they were standing, watching them intently. He wasn't sure why, nor was he about to analyze the reasons at this moment, but it added to his excitement immensely. Kneeling down beside the bed on the carpeted floor, Sandy pulled Kevin's slacks and boxers down in one quick tug and, without hesitation, took him into her mouth, leaving him with a swirl of emotions and physical sensations. With an escort giving him oral sex in a hotel room and his friend watching, the whole thing was quite the morally ambiguous scene, which in his mind only added to the quality of the experience. He felt like he was in his own porn movie, while still working on grasping the reality of the moment. Additionally, there was something extremely perverse and erotic, standing just inches from his friend who was intently watching Sandy go to work, leaving Kevin acutely aware of, and turned on by, his friend watching her mouth on him. He could see that Scott was hard under his clothing, and, as he sat in the chair, unashamed of his voyeurism, he began to touch himself, eventually unzipping and unrestricting his cock from his slacks. Sandy pulled back, which was a relief for Kevin since he found himself dangerously close to releasing. She reached up into the nearby desk and opened her small purse and took out a condom. She tore it open, smiling up at him. After removing it, she slid it onto his cock with amazingly practiced and smooth movements. He felt her fingers on his length, quickly and smoothly unrolling it to his base, despite his cock jumping from his excitement. He wouldn't have been able to put it on as well himself, a reminder that she was clearly a professional. After she finished unrolling the condom, she smiled at Kevin, remaining on her knees, then turned to Scott, bent over, and now took him into her mouth. Kevin knew what was expected, and, stepping behind Sandy, he knelt down on his knees behind her bent-over body. Not bothering to ease in carefully, he inserted himself inside of her, causing Sandy to let out a very loud, very rehearsed moan. Grabbing her hips, Kevin began thrusting as he watched the back of her head bobbing on his friend, who was intently watching him thrust into her. The sounds of the room were dirty and wrong, and incredibly erotic for those same reasons. Kim followed Ryan into his bedroom as he flipped on a light switch, illuminating the room. He pulled out their small overnight bags, setting them on the bed, and began to remove his clothes from the dresser. "I really hate to leave. This has been an amazing couple of days," Kim managed to say, despite the fear and excitement of needing to leave for their safety. "I know, but we will be back, I promise," Ryan answered, turning to her and smiling as she moved past him towards the bathroom to gather her belongings. "But your safety is the important thing right now." Entering the bathroom and finding the light switch, she flipped it on and made her way to the sink counter, calling back to Ryan. "And yours." "I know it sounds like typical male bravado, but I am only concerned about your safety. We need to get you off the island and back to Detroit. I promise we'll make sure Rick stops terrorizing you and gets picked up by the Detroit police," he called out in a louder voice to better carry into the bathroom. Kim didn't reply. She couldn't. As she was putting her hairbrush into a small toiletry bag, she was suddenly grabbed from behind with a hand roughly planted over her mouth, pulling her back against a body much larger than her own. The terror of the moment seemed to slow time down. She immediately knew what was happening, but was unable to scream with the hand covering her mouth. The hand. Despite the slowing of the moment and her shock, the searing pain of the large hand on her mouth was excruciating, pushing her lips into her teeth and pinching them. Her jaw felt like it was about to be crushed. Despite the pain from the other arm wrapping around her abdomen just as violently, the pain on her face and mouth was more than she could bear, but she was unable to cry out, and unable to breathe with the top of the hand also covering her nose.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on bigworldnetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.